Sports Illustrated begets Paydirt, and now we're at data-driven football, the gateway game. Ron Pisarz, thank you so much for filling us in on the latest on the Paydirt concept.
Glad to be here, and thanks for inviting me. Always excited to talk about this great platform. You call it a gateway game, and it certainly is. There's ease and simplicity to it, and it certainly garnered quite a following over the years.
It's a perennial top three, you know. It's that Status Pro, and then of course you get into the APBA and the Strato. I mean, it just really hit the right buttons at the right time. So when did you get involved and how? And
Sure, a little background. So I started playing the game in the mid to late 70s, like many of us, and just fell in love with it. We had groups of friends, and we would, Friday night would come, and we'd have a sleepover. We'd rotate through the sleepovers, and we'd be playing all weekend. And so I played it for 5-10 years probably, and then family, profession, career, all kids, all of those things. I'm a software engineer by trade, and .NET, Microsoft's .NET platform was released 2000 timeframe, I guess it was. So I'm like, I need to learn the new tools, and I said, what piece of software could I write that would be representative and maybe have some benefit, and I can learn, kick the tires with it. So I just said, let me try Paydirt, and I had no intention to get to where I'm at right now with the platform, but it started then, and I guess it took a few years to get it up and running, and I guess it was around 2006, 2007. When I said, well, really to take it to the next level, I have to start designing the seasons, and it's just gone from there.
Well, we are eternally grateful, sir. So how many seasons have you gone back, and what are your plans for future seasons?
Right. So I started with the 05 season. I did 05 and 06 kind of at the same time. The play-by-play data, if you read the original game box and the original designers, they talk about the play-by-play and the data and the statistical analysis. And, when I read that, I really took it to the nth degree. Now with technology in the NFL, that data is out there, and it's live, and it's real time. So, I wrote some software to read that data down and parse it. And so I literally have all the plays from every season all the way back to 2005. I plan to continue doing it as long as the NFL keeps publishing the data. I would love to go back. So I have done some research. They do, the data, the play-by-play data that they publish now is in the same format, I think back to 98. So that I could go back a little further. They have, I think the play-by-play data is also available in an image format. They must have had, the NFL statisticians back to 81. I've seen some of that data as well, handwritten, play-by-play, same format, but it's scanned in, so my parser wouldn't be able to read it. So, my plan would be to continue doing it, and I'd love to go back and do some of those classic seasons, 78, 84, 2000, 72, 85. I mean, they all have merit, right? Even the college game, I get a lot of requests for that. There's some folks in the community have approached me. I'm only one person though, and I have a day job.
That's the unfortunate part. Work gets
it is.
I know it's rude. It's very rude. So would you refresh us all on basically how the game plays?
The basic premise of the game and how it plays is you've got two teams. It's really from a coaching perspective, team level, no players. So you're not setting formations, you're not substituting players. So that's the simplicity, maybe the gateway perspective of it. Each team has 9 offensive plays and 6 formations. Those are kind of, generic, I would say, and they're the same for all teams. Again, that simplicity that you refer to. Here's where the game is unique, and really where the engine I think still holds the test of time. I think the designers were tremendously ahead of their time. 3 6-sided dice with different face values. So the probability, they called them probability dice when they first came out. And that's because the dispersion of probability, you get 216 outcomes versus 36. So you've got granularity in your outcomes. So the basic premise is I choose a play, you choose a play, I roll my dice, you roll your dice, and we look at each of our team's charts, which represent the team's strengths and weaknesses, and we kind of do a cross-reference. And there's a chart that kind of tells you how to do that cross-reference and resolve the outcome.
Do you have folks, I mean, I imagine you get the Delphi folks. Are you seeing folks do the full season replays, doing the whole stats keeping thing?
Oh, I do get the Delphi folks. I started my own Facebook group. I think that has its own legs. And within my group anyway, obviously it's dedicated to DDF. So there's a lot more participation, a lot more conversation. We have online leagues, and we do replays, and it's not just me hosting it. If you have the PC game and have Zoom or TeamViewer, Teams or whatever, you can host the game and host the screen and replay. The software can do head-to-head, simulate a game, simulate a week, any combination of those sorts of things. So yeah, we have season replays going on all the time.
It's interesting how folks really just seem to pick a game and it stays with them for life. What do you think that is it just a function of the level of detail someone's comfortable with, or is it purely the nostalgia aspect, or a combination?
That is a great question, because I played Status, I played APBA, I played Strat, I played Football Strategy, I played Paydirt. Even the one with the tutor one where you flip the little lever, and I've played dozens of games. And when I thought, hey, well, what software can I write, I came back to this game, and I still come back to it. I think it's all of the above. It really is. For me personally, the simplicity, I can play a game in an hour, maybe even less. The realism, especially with the work I've done, I think I've really amped the game up quite a bit from a simulation perspective and a realistic perspective. It really rivals a lot of the competitors in the market. And the fun element. I mean, those are the three things: time, realism, and fun. I like it, and that's it for me. And the other element to that question is it's interesting. I was thinking when I start this, I'm like, okay, well, if I could build on top of the game that's already there, that will I can reach the market more easily, or draw in those folks or whatever. And I certainly have. I guess I was maybe a little more ambitious. It kind of bit me a little bit, because for that same reason, I think folks are like, oh, it's Paydirt, or oh, it is a gateway game. Oh, I know how that works, and it's not really for me. And I think it kind of, they're not giving DDF a fair shake as a result of it. They've maybe moved on to 4th Street or APBA or Strat or player level, or some of the other team level games, and they think, oh, it's just Paydirt, it's basic, and it's not the case. So 6 of one, half of the other. There was some advantages, some disadvantages.
Obviously, there is no perfect game, right? So you've got you choose the views of the game and that level of, as you say, granularity. If you talk about going back to those old systems, rather the old seasons, would you anticipate any sort of, we always talk about normalization, to try, or will the system inherently take the stats that you have? Not that I don't think the DDF or Paydirt folks are really playing cross era that much, but would that be a possibility, or is that a concern for you?
That's a great question, and I get asked that all the time. And you would have to do some sort of from where I sit now and what I've learned over the few years of doing this work. I would want to publish some sort of cross-era indexing to make it apples and apples. And somebody emailed me just yesterday with that same exact question. Hey, I want to play a 79 Steelers against the 2020 Chiefs. And you can do that, but the game engine out of the box really isn't designed to do that. So, and the amount of work, again, I would love to, and I'd love to build that index. And it's certainly possible to do that, but I'm not there yet, but I would love to do that for sure.
And to be clear, you mentioned that the original Paydirt Sports Illustrated designers talked about, the process, and you are quite generous. And on your website, there is the design process link, and you go through that there as well. For the normalization aspect, would you be, kind of meeting in the middle, or in terms of, you've got what some would call the dead ball football era up to, the pass happy eras here from, say, the late 80s, early 90s, run and shoot all the way to today. So you're kind of trying to match the professional game's inherent strictures or facilitation of these, offenses that were kind of tamped down. The defense had all the reign of the field, and now it's the complete opposite. How would you approach that for DDF?
That question is one of the reasons why I haven't really invested a tremendous amount of time in it yet. But no, you're right, and that's part of the challenge. I would say, just as a basic fundamental paradigm to set that context, if you've got the 72 Dolphins, you've got the 78 Steelers, and maybe they're the 78 Steelers. I'm just guessing what their rush defense statistic might be, 2.8 yards a carry, let's just say. Nowadays it's 4.2, 4.1, 4.3 in that range. How do you make up that difference? And if those guys were playing today, would it really be that much different from what the current average? Would it be all the way down to the 2.8? Would it be 3.1? Would it be 3.3? And make those range comparisons. Like, I know when I'm looking at relative performance within one season, you're talking 2 yards different. The best offense right around 6 yards a game or per play, excuse me. Defense, you're looking at the best defense 4.5 yards per play. You're within 2 yards from best to worst. So, does that variance hold back then? I haven't done that work, and I don't have the play-by-play, and I haven't spent a lot of time. I would love to do it, and I would, certainly, like I said, you can certainly calculate that and work through it. It's just a matter of time and resources. But that's where I'd start. I would want to compare how well is what's the universe of data for 78 or 72 and 2000 and 2020? Look at those ranges, look at those min maxes, look at those variances, look at those deviations. And if they're similar, then I can say, okay, well, then that 2.8 yards per carry, that's real. And I would be able to index it appropriately. Or no, it's not real. And it was 2.8 then, but it really would have been 3.1 in today's game. There's some qualitative piece to that, but it first starts with doing that statistical comparison between the data sets.
And then you've also got to factor in special teams efficiencies and overall team efficiencies these days, whether it's protecting the ball, all aspect phases of the game, right?
Absolutely.
So you mentioned right off the bat, 72 Dolphins, 78 Steelers, 79 Steelers, and some other seasons there. Who are your personal favorites, season-wise, team-wise, player-wise?
So I started it out. I'm from Central Pennsylvania. My dad's a Nittany Lion, and growing up in State College, I was a fan of the Steelers. They were hot at that time, and I was, even though I was right in the middle of the state, I went with the Steelers for whatever reason. Growing up and up until I would say 95, And even when I was playing Paydirt, I was all Pittsburgh. And my dad and I moved to Baltimore, and I lived in Baltimore for 20 plus years. And so now I'm a Ravens fan. But I think if I look back, which is an odd thing, right? Baltimore and Pittsburgh, but obviously those classic Pittsburgh seasons, 78, 79, 77, probably even one of those in the mid 70s as well. 72 Dolphins. They're undefeated. I'd love to see what they're, apply my analysis, get the play by and look at the chart. 85 Bears defense. The early mid 80s, Miami, San Francisco in there, 84, early 90s, Buffalo and Dallas. I mean, you can look at any season. And I was watching the end of the game last night, and she was interviewing Aaron Rodgers, and he says, how can you not be romantic about football? And I can't remember what the specific, that was the quote, but in reference to what he was saying. And I just thought, what a unique thing to say. And when you think about it, I mean, look at all those seasons that I just mentioned. You can go back to pretty much all of them, and there's so many underlying stories and things that you can think of and remember. I'd want to have all of them done if I could.
For sure. Yeah, perfectly well said. That's it. Yeah, your own team. You like to play your own team, but then you start looking at these other, possible projects. It's like, wow, they came so close, or this was the things that occur within season to season, team to team are like, man, that's amazing. Teams that just missed playoffs because of the rules or a tiebreaker or whatever.
Oh, absolutely. And even in my online league, we have 8 guys who have been doing it. And what we try to do is we pick the 2 divisions. We don't like picking the top echelon. We don't want to make it too easy for ourselves. So we pick like playoff caliber teams, and we try to pick the 2 divisions that are matched up against one another. Like last year was AFC North against NFC East. And I did happen to play Baltimore, which was my team, which was the first year that I've actually played my team in my replays. Most of the times we don't, because either the divisions don't line up or what the core is to have competitive games. So if you've got a division with a team that's 4-12, there's no chance. We want to give every participant a chance to make the playoffs. So I played them for the first time, but in previous replays, I played the Patriots, I played Dallas Cowboys, I played whatever. And to your point, it's like, man, you really learn the subtleties in certain teams, and you learn, like you said, boy, these guys were really better than the record and just had some unfortunate circumstances that put them out of the playoffs or whatever. So that to me is the fun of it, is seeing what could have happened, not just with your team, but with the league. And I think for the most part, the range of outcomes is broader than we think it is my personal feeling.
For sure. Well, don't they say that a game comes down to only a few plays, really?
That's right.
In your league, are you replaying the entire actual season? Are you making up a season? Do you have any strictures on kind of statistical outcomes?
So how I run my league, and everybody does it slightly differently. My league, we replay the whole season as is. So like I said, we pick 2 divisions, or if the divisions don't line up too well, we'll pick maybe the 8 teams that are bubble teams. Maybe from 8-8 to 10-6, 11-5, 7-9 maybe. And we'll draft those teams. And then what will happen is we will replay, so for all the games with a human coach, if I'm coaching the Ravens, I'm coaching them for all 16 games of the season. Okay. And then we got 7 other guys, they're coaching their team for the entire season. So if Baltimore is playing Miami, and there isn't, Miami isn't a human coach team, one of the other guys will coach as Miami to play as the opponent. So all of our games that our teams are involved in are head-to-head games, and it normally runs, depending on what the actual NFL schedule is, we'll play anywhere between 80 and 120 games head-to-head. with our 8 players. So it's a reasonable footprint. And so we'll play all of those. And, you know, the goal is we measure success based on your final current regular season record to how that team did. So if Baltimore was last year, Baltimore was 11-5, I finished 10-6. And then at the end of the season, I actually do a actual to replay statistical comparison for all of our 8 teams, as well as the league's statistics in total. It's fascinating. It really is fascinating.
How close do you get more often than not?
For the most part, when I reconcile, so just a little bit about the QA process and how my design works. I probably simulate 400 seasons from the time that I finish the design until the time that I release. The variance in simulation results to actual are usually, for most stats, are within 0.1%. So when we do our replays, I'm going to say probably 90% of the statistics hold true to that. In my case, maybe I'm giving away, showing my cards here. In my case, my run pass ratio was almost identical. Just how I managed the team played out very similarly to how Baltimore played. And again, maybe that's my view. I'm aligning, maybe that's me as a player. I align how they did, or that's just how I play. I don't know. But, I came in short and my stats were nearly spot on. Other players, they will be far more aggressive passing the ball. So their run pass ratio might shift from, say, 58 to 65, or they'll run more heavy. And, those changes in game plan, which is really the purpose of the game. It's like, what could a team have done differently to change their outcome? And it's interesting because even with those changes, the stats don't vary that much. And, maybe there's a few turnovers difference. Maybe there's, third down conversions a little lower. Again, I think the difference between, a 6-10 team and a 10-6 team could be very narrow in some cases. So it only takes a few things to shift one way or the other, and you're out. So, but I would say on a whole, the engine really does a great job at simulating, team performance, which is again a core deliverable of the game.
When you created the PC version, did you incorporate any different functionality, anything slightly different, and do folks tend to prefer the tabletop or the PC? Great
question. So it was funny when I first got the code up and running, and again, I'm learning .NET, so I'm more focused on the tech stack than I am the game. So I didn't even think the thing was going to run. So I got it up and running because I wrote the AI, and I was like, I remember the day when I hit the button and said simulate a game, and it simulated the game, and I looked at the play-by-play calls, and it was like, oh my goodness, it worked. So then once I got the engine up and running, and I started to look at the output of the Paydirt seasons, and I'm not minimizing that, but that was one of the things that said, oh, I need to start designing the current seasons, and I need to use the play-by-play data, and I've got to reconcile the statistics. So a couple of things. The core timing of the game was not granular enough, so I had to tweak that to get the play counts accurate. I was coming up with too few plays, so that was the first anomaly that I found. So I changed the timing a little bit. Some of the other things, I wouldn't say I changed too much, but what ended up happening is after I made that tweak and I started collecting the play-by-play data, and I started to really think about how play resolution works with the original game, the priority chart. We talked about that earlier. So how do you blend the statistical performance and you represent that performance and get those very finite and specific outcomes, and you get them to work with the engine? What I found is certain gaps in the original designers game. There were, for example, their defenses had limited ability on influencing penalties. Defenses had limited ability to sack rate on the quarterback. And again, it's just how certain outcomes are represented in the game and how the engine resolves those outcomes. So what I started to notice is, okay, I can improve the statistical result and the team representation if I do this. So I created additional charts. I call them optional or advanced charts that take certain aspects that either the designers didn't have the data, they made some assumptions on, what have you, and I basically added those additional features to the PC game and to the board game to improve the experience. So I don't really have to change much, but once I got into it, I found ways to improve it. And then to your second part, what do they prefer? So, I'm a technology guy, and I say that I don't like my phone. I try not to have my phone. I try to live life and be in the moment, right? So I'm thinking, okay, well, who's once I release this and once it gets going, who's going to want to play with the board game, right? It's a PC game. I can play you online, and boom, we're done in 30 minutes or whatever. And I can't remember why I made the decision. Oh, I know, this is what happened. Folks started saying, you know what, Ron, can you send me printed copies of the charts? I want to look at the hard paper just like I did. So I'm like, okay, I found a printer here in Richmond, Virginia, a professional company. I send them the PDFs. He does a great job. I mean, immeasurably better than what you think of with the game. Starts doing these prints, and then people are like, do you sell the board game? I had a copy of Paydirt and I sold it in a yard sale. And I don't want to go, I'd rather have just one transaction. I don't want to buy a game from eBay and to buy the charts from you. Can you get me a copy of the game? So I said, all right, well, maybe I should start selling the board game. I kid you not that it's probably 60-40 board game people, 60 for the board game on tabletop, maybe 40% for the PC game, and they bounce back and forth between the two, just depending on personality and preferences. But it's a broad distribution. The tabletop. I was shocked at how much the tabletop, how much that interest really was. Pleasantly surprised too.
Well, that's it. They always say, you don't have to plug it in. You just go and play. It's sometimes even the supposed ease of setting up a PC game or a Madden or something like that. It's like, oh man, sometimes it's not out right there, So.
And it's right, and it's not just that. There's a like obviously in current times in the things like tabletop simulator and board gamery. Great, right? We all had some benefit from being able to do those things, but when it comes down to it, sitting at a table, if you can do that with a friend, and pulling out the and having a conversation and interacting and it really adds to the experience. So I found that they're not substitutes; they're complementary options.
Have you ever had occasion to converse with or contact the original design?
Not directly. I don't know, maybe folks know, Dr. Nicely passed away 2 years ago, I believe. He's a Virginian. I reside in Virginia as well. Lynchburg College, I think, is where he was a math professor. So there was some local news on that. Certainly, folks know of him if you're close to the game. I did not converse with him directly. However, one of the hobbyists, Matt Flore, who was part of the community, he did, and he actually, I don't know all the details of that conversation, but he and Dr. Nicely had frequent conversation. I guess after an initial contact in the late '90s, I guess would be my guess there, and. Dr. Nicely was open and shared his work with Matt, and Matt kind of took it over, kind of similar to what I have done, just an enthusiast who loved the game. And when I came onto the scene, obviously in the various forums and stuff, Matt reached out to me and we started talking. So So indirectly, he and I had many conversations on, what Dr. Nicely did and how he did. Matt never shared the formula with me, but it was funny because I had I had gained a lot of momentum. I'll say it that way. I had gained a lot of momentum, and I always publish free samples for folks to download. It's just like any product these days, right? Hey, I want to try before I buy. So I post that out there, and I guess Matt got wind of it, and so he downloaded, and I guess he started maybe looking at my charts and comparing my work to what Nicely would have done, or what I think he was heavily scrutinizing it because he's a purist. He was a purist, and he doesn't want the game tarnished. And Matt ended up passing away before we really got to being close friends. But again, he stands by the game and he stands by Nicely's design. So he was really shaking his finger at me, and he's looking at my work and he's like, "Hey, Ron, this is pretty darn good. I like what you're doing here. Why don't we start? Would you think about partnering?" And by that, like I said, by that time, he's like, "I can give you. You give me the data. I'll show you, and we'll run it through Nicely's formula." And I was like, I don't know, but so that was my closest to speaking with the designer. So not first generation, but second generation contact.
Whatever game system you have, and there's that mythic magic formula in the safe deposit box that no one can touch, but still, you can get close, and there's that subjectivity even within a formula, wouldn't you say? I mean, you still have to make some choices.
Great question. And, I try to be as open and transparent because I think that builds confidence in any system, right? If you're open and I don't want to say I challenge, but I welcome, I think I have a good set of skills. I think I call myself competent. I don't call myself an expert. I don't like that word. But, I would love to, invite folks to check my calculations, and folks in the community have, and they challenge me and they come out. And so that's a good thing. And to your point, when I'm watching the games, I get this all the time. And you really get, the folks who are really, got the same genetic deformity that I do, where they'll text me during the game. "Hey, Ron, did you see that play? Was that a long pass? Was that a fumble? Was that a sack? How will I see that in the game?" And I obviously have guidelines and criteria that define each of the plays and formations. So when I'm watching the game and I'm mapping that outcome into the game, and I'm explaining to people how does that get represented. Sure enough, there are scenarios where, like, a sideline pass is one of the offensive plays. So if you've got there might be a wheel route where the running back is coming out of the backfield and he's going down the sideline, and he's literally right on the sideline, and he's going, and that's a common play for depending on your team and your running backs. I treat it as a sideline because my definition is within 5 yards of the sideline. Doesn't matter which way the receiver's running. He could be even cutting in, but if the point of reception is within 5 yards of the sideline, that's a sideline. So, but then there's times where it's like, okay, well, his foot's right on that, it's like right on that marker. What was the intent of the play, or there's a ball batted at the line of scrimmage and then intercepted, and then you can see the two intended receivers behind them, behind the line. One is 6 yards downfield, the other's 16 yards downfield, and they're lined up right there. So who was the quarterback going to? Is he going to the underneath receiver or the deeper receiver down? So yeah, there are circumstances where you have to apply some subjectivity. And that's true of any system. Anybody who's trying to do this work has that challenge. And I think the thing to take away is you want consistency in how you apply that, so that you have apples and apples, as well as transparency, and explain how did you come up with that. And then people, can share their view and say, okay, great, that's exactly what I would think, or, oh, you're not thinking about it right. Did you think about it this way?
Transparency. I'm glad you said that word. I mean, that's really the name of the game of games these days. I mean, certainly, man, it's not just a social media thing. I mean, it's although it certainly is the facilitator of it, but it's kind of the selling point. The quality of it is a big part of it. It's like, how accurate is accurate?
And that's why it's like, okay, don't take my word for it. If you buy, I'm not saying buy the PC game, but if you have a PC game, you can run the same season simulations that I do and see what the game's doing. See it, experience it for yourself. Don't just take my word for it, but see how it plays out.
About how much time a week do you devote to taking care of the baby?
So during the season, so right now is actually probably my busiest time because there's no bye weeks. So you got all 16 games in the season, and it roughly takes, depending on the game video editor, the Game Pass service, which NFL, anybody can subscribe to it. I think it's $99. That's what I use. It's highly marketed on their website and throughout their games. They condense the video down to anywhere from 30 minutes. Longer games will go up to 45 minutes. Add a little bit of overhead for me to set up my parser and all. So it's a little under an hour at most per game. So that's 16 hours a week. Ultimately, let's just say, now this week it's 17, this year it's 17 games. So 17 times 16, that's data collection. And then once the regular season ends, it takes me about 4 hours per team to go through all that analyzed data and package it and push it into the game format. So it's not trivial. It's not trivial, but this is how I justify it. I probably would watch 1 or 2 games anyway. So that's 6 hours. So it's only the marginal investment of time that I'm really out of pocket on.
Diligence. Now, given all the experience you've had here, have you ever thought about trying your hand at a non-football game?
Yes, I have. I was actually a baseball. Believe football was not my favorite sport growing up. I was a huge baseball fan, huge. Now I'm still an Orioles fan, and I admit it, but I don't watch them anymore as much as I should because they're not doing as well, to be frank. But I've thought about baseball, and if I think about how the engine of how DDF works, oh man, I'd have to think more on it. I don't see an analogous like easy port where I can just kind of take the fundamental design principles and move it over. I could, but I think then you're like pitch level statistics almost on the baseball side. I think the data processing would be extreme. So I'd want to dial that back. There would have to be some changes there. I would love to do a hockey sim. My son played hockey, plays hockey even still today in a rec league. I've become a fan of the game over the past 10, 15 years, I'd say. I would love to really do a kick butt hockey game, but I don't know. I've got to wait for retirement before I can start to take on more projects. Horse racing is one that's also near and dear to my heart. I have some solid ideas for that. So I'm maybe in the off season, but I want to take DDF to the cloud. That's kind of a project I'm working on now. Move it to Azure or AWS and port the code over. Windows desktop worked up until maybe 5 years ago, maybe even before that. But the platform's really constrained right now, and I'd love to open it up and get it on a more cross-platform, more accessible way for folks to interact with it.
I know we cannot thank you enough, sir. I mean, this is just, it's like you pull off that Paydirt game and then you see the DDF is still there, man. And folks, it's absolutely a thrill. Last thoughts, given what you just said about, taking it to the cloud, what are your thoughts about sustaining or the abiding interest in whether it's tabletop or PC or console sports gaming, vis-a-vis kind of people's gaming habits generally now, and in particular, kind of the evolution of the fan base of football and sports in general?
Excellent question. Excellent question. Love this question. And what I would say to that is, you know, a good game is a good game, whether it was in 1969, 1989, 2021. If there is something there, you can build an ecosystem or a platform around it. You could build a brand around it. If it's a good book is a good book, whether it was written 200 years ago or today. A good movie is a good movie, 100 years ago or 50 years ago as it is today. Same thing with gaming. And what for me, particularly on the sports side, I just want to I know what, and probably anybody in this hobby, the realism, the friendships, the time spent in the hobby, those memories are priceless, right? So I wouldn't want that to get lost to, people coming after me, right? I know what playing the game meant to me and my friends, and I get messages like this all the time, just like you framed up this question. So to me, it's about being pure to that. And it just so happens that Paydirt is the game that meant the most to me, and what I've been able to do with it. So, whether it's on the cloud, whether it's the tabletop format, hopefully the outcome is it somehow brings people together. That's what I've gained out of this process is the community that has come back to the game, and the folks that I've met, the people that I interact with, the emails that I get are just, one gentleman, he's, his dad, him and his dad used to play the game, early 70s, and up until life caught up with them and kind of fell away from it. They started playing it again. Every night before the Super Bowl, I post the draft versions of the Super Bowl teams. His dad's like 86 or 88, and they've been doing it for like a decade now. And he's like, this is my favorite day of the year. And I love to hear his game report, after they do the pre-play. And it's really about that. So I think if I'm true to what the game can deliver and represent, hopefully folks will continue to talk about it and get together and just have that experience with each other, playing a game and having fun, because ultimately that's what the objective is.
Awesome, sir. Brilliantly said. Thank you so much for your insights, for sharing your time here, and for keeping a really beloved game alive.
And thanks for the invitation, Jeff. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Great questions, and hope to see everyone soon.